John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365, a football Friday, and only 18 days until the Eagles open up their camp and the 2023 season gets underway with a lot expected, a lot of pressure, and I want to revisit the question I asked of Rob with you, John, because I don't think it's going to be a make or break. Maybe just because it's intriguing, I think that it will not be a major factor in whether the Eagles win 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 games this year, because I think they've got it pretty well covered. But the running back question I put past Rob. Boston Scott back. Kenny Gainwell back. Miles Sanders out, and he was the guy who was the workman back last year. And he's basically replaced by DeAndre Swift and Rashaad Penny, one running back the Eagles traded for, minimal to have to give up to the Detroit Lions to get him. Thought it was an outstanding deal by Howie Roseman. And Rashaad Penny basically on a make-good contract. If he stays healthy and has a big year, he's going to go back out on the free agent market next year and maybe get paid that much more. But it's kind of on a sing-for-his-supper type year. And Trey Sermon back as last year, who was the fourth back who didn't get activated much. This year, he's going to be the fifth back who doesn't get activated much. I don't know that they can carry five backs on this team. How are they going to handle this, John? Just from a roster perspective, we saw what they did last year. Sermon got activated a couple of times all season because someone wasn't quite ready to go on a given week, but they kept four on the roster all year long. Who are those four and how do they manage it? Because DeAndre Swift, Rashaad Penny, Kenny Gainwell, even Boston Scott. Boston did not get deactivated much during his career. Is that going to be Boston Scott's spot in life this year? Deactivated on game day?
Potentially, but I think Rashaad Penny's one of the more interesting stories of camp, as you mentioned. I like that terminology. He's got to sing for a supper, but I would take it one further. I would say, he's got to be the lead back because he's not going to help in other ways. We talked about special teams at the beginning of the show. Not going to help there. So why are you going to keep him around as the third or fourth back? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're right. I don't think they're going to five. We're just talking about how many defensive linemen they have. They need these roster spots to keep legitimate NFL players. And don't get me wrong, Rashaad Penny is clearly the best pure runner on this team. He's always hurt. We know the story. But when he's on the field, he produces. But he's always hurt. If he's not the number one back, like Swift helps in other ways because Swift can catch the football. He can do a lot of different things. Kenny Gainwell the same way. Boston Scott can play special teams. He's the top kick returner on the team, even though that becomes less and less valuable each year in the NFL. He really was a good kick returner when he took that job last year. Those guys help in other ways. Rashaad Penny is just, he's going to run the football. And if he's not the lead back, why are you keeping him around? You only paid him $600,000. You can easily move on. So to me, he's going to be the linchpin. If he's here, Trey Sermon's probably hitting the waiver wire and, then the practice squad if they can get him back. But yeah, I can't see them keeping five running backs. So, what does Rashaad Penny do? Does he prove, hey, I'm the guy? And that might be for 5 games, Jody, and then he gets hurt. But he's got to be the guy for 5 games. And it's going to be an interesting, I think, training camp storyline.
And while I agree with Rob, and I tried to deter him for this, and he would have none of it, of course it's going to be decided by what happens before the season starts. But even that makes me laugh because how much work did the Eagles actually do? You're going to make a running back decision because a guy looks good in shorts and shells. Okay, that's what it's now come down to. You used to be able to actually judge the way a guy might play on Sundays by what he did in preseason, but because of the CBA and the Eagles' overall stance of protecting their players, how do you really judge who's
running backs? One of those positions. The Eagles, we talked about, they don't even do team drills. It's strictly 7-on-7 in the spring. They don't even do team drills. So the offensive, defensive linemen, they're all doing individual work. The running backs, they get involved, but in the passing game.
And that's not going to help Rashaad Penny, as you just pointed out.
No. So, yeah. But the thing about Rashaad Penny, all right, you're not worried about the physicality. You've seen it. You're worried about him staying healthy. I mean, but if he's not going to be the guy, I don't see why he's here. I really don't. So either to me, he's the lead back, whether it's 1 game, 5 games, 10 games, hopefully 18 games, hopefully 20 games into the Super Bowl, 18 weeks in the regular season. It's unlikely, but to me, I brought him in. He's going to be my starting running back week 1. That's how I would go about it. And I would run him until he can't run anymore. And then I would move towards the more committee approach with Swift and Gainwell and Scott when he does get injured. But he's better than those guys. I'm not sure the Eagles think about it the way I do, but he's a significantly better runner than all 3 of those guys.
Right. But how do you balance that against, we make this decision, he's the guy, oh, shoot, here he goes, he's out for a month again. That's the hard part about Rashaad Penny, because you can love his game, you can crunch his numbers, average yards per carry off the charts, and just when you say, all right, we're committing to him, boom, he's gone, and then you're screwed. So.
Well, that's why you got to have that contingency. You got to know in the back of your mind, all right, he's the guy until he's not the guy. And you have to have Swift ready, and you have to have Gainwell ready. And Boston, you already know, is going to be ready when you just pull the emergency cord. He's proven it. Yeah, I mean, but that's part of the gamble. They had Jody, they had a 1,269-yard rusher last year. Say what you want about Miles Sanders, but that's not easy to replace.
Right.
Even with a great offensive line and a quarterback that makes it easier for running backs, which I acknowledge, it's still not easy to replace.
And here's the one place that I would disagree with what Rob said. He said, maybe, just maybe, if all the guys are healthy and living up to the back of their football cards, not baseball card if you're talking football players, but their trading card with their stats say they are, well, then the Eagles would have an excess and maybe they can make a trade. There's going to be no trade for a running back this year.
No.
Teams don't value running backs.
No.
Just look at the contracts that Rashaad Penny and Boston Scott signed during this offseason. They were both free agents. They could have gone to any team that they wanted to. They both chose the Philadelphia Eagles because I'm going to guess here that no one offered them more or even maybe as much as the Philadelphia Eagles. So there aren't teams out there that are going, God, please let us give us a chance to trade for Boston.
Well, if there's a trade like that, you remember Eli Harold? He was here for
Eli Harold. Give me details. I do not remember Eli Harold.
He was outside linebacker, defensive end, sort of tweener, 3rd round pick. Just looking him up, San Francisco 3rd round pick. He got traded to the Eagles in 2019 in training camp for Ryan Bates, who was at the time.
Ryan Bates, I remember that name.
Yeah, well, he's a starter in Buffalo. At the time, he was an undrafted free agent. He was a rookie, Ryan Bates. And he wasn't going to make the Eagles, who were deep and on the offensive line. And so it was just a player for player trade early in training camp. The Eagles needed some help. Didn't make the team. Um, and moved on. Sometimes you see that. That's why I was bringing it up, where you have a surplus at one position and somebody else has a surplus at a different position. You need that. You make a quick trade, and a lot of times, in the case of Eli Harold, he didn't even make the team, and it worked out for Buffalo, who got Ryan Bates and has turned into not a great player, but he's a starter.
I'm sure Howie is appreciative of your bringing up a trade that he lost, Johnny Mac. That Howie doesn't like taking those L's.
Well, Ryan wasn't making this team, so I mean, just wasn't. So, you try, you take a flyer, didn't work. I mean, that's a loss because Ryan developed, but he wasn't making this team. He wasn't. I mean, there's no way he was making this team. So I get the thought process. I'm just bringing up, sometimes you have those player for player trades in training camp, and sometimes they mean nothing and they turn into nothing. But as a whole, somebody has a bunch of injuries, a couple injuries at running back, and they say, hey, let's get a veteran guy. But I don't think the Eagles want to trade Boston Scott. I mean, I think they want him on this team. I think they value him to a certain level. Certain level. Obviously, they're signing him to 1-year deals, but they know. I always bring up the utility player baseball comparison. There's an art to being a utility player in baseball. Not everybody can do it. The assumption is, oh, well, this guy's better. Just put him on the roster. But if he's only playing once every 5-7 days, he can't do it. Whereas you have these guys with the mentality that they can do it. And I'm more of an old school baseball guy. I always bring up Luis Sojo because he was great at it. Played every 8 different positions, big hits and big situation. Now, if you had to play every day, you'd be in trouble. But he was just he could handle it, and he excelled in the role. That to me is Boston Scott. You don't want him out there for 17 games, but if you need him, as the New York Giants can attest, he freaking shows up.
I actually believe that was the place that the Eagles could lose him to. I thought the Giants might just sign him just so he'd stop scoring touchdowns against them for no other reason. If you can't stop him, sign him. That's what I thought Boston Scott's eventual landing spot could be, but he stays here in Philadelphia. I'm just pointing out that they've got at least one, if not too many running backs as of right now, and you went down as far as Kennedy Brooks. Good luck on that practice squad, Kennedy. The Eagles have
now did that make sense to you? Because that doesn't make sense to me that Penny can't be part of the rotation. Did I explain it incorrectly? Like he can be part of a rotation. I'm not saying he's going. I'm saying, but he's got to be the lead back. He's not going to be the third down back. He's not going to help you on special teams. Am I not explaining
well, no, you
it correctly?
You did a good job explaining it, John. It's just the Eagles like to think of themselves as innovators, and maybe they're planning on doing something we haven't seen in the National Football League before. And I'm not predicting or projecting this. I'm just saying be careful because it's the Eagles and they like to be ahead of the curve. Maybe they have designated starters that on a given week, Rashaad Penny is inactive. And then the next week, Rashaad Penny is the starter. That on a given week, DeAndre Swift is active, and the next week he's inactive, even though he started in the week before, carried 12 times for 65 yards and a touchdown. I don't know that they won't do that. That's not something you see in the NFL. It hasn't happened before, but the game and sports in general are ever changing. So maybe the Eagles will try and do something altogether different this year because they're running back situation is unique.
I always call that stuff laboratory stuff. I'd like to call it. You remember when the Eagles? I always bring up 21 Pony their 21 pony formation in the offseason when they had Darren Sproles and they drafted Donnell Pumphrey. And they're like, these guys are tough matchups in the passing game. And they did it in the offseason, 7-on-7s and shorts. They did team drills back then. And the minute the pads came on, they said, oh, somebody's got to block somebody. We can't really run 21 pony. My point to, if Rashaad Penny, and maybe Fletcher Cox in his prime is a better example of this, because every year when Fletcher was the best player on defense and, arguably the second best defensive tackle in football, every year the Eagles would say, man, we got to start limiting his reps. He was playing too much. He was playing too many reps. And they were concerned about, wearing him down. And every year, big situations. Are you going to take Fletcher Cox off the field? Nope. Big third. Nope. You're not taking him off the field. If Rashaad Penny is gashing people and he's healthy, you're not taking him off the field. You're not. That's just the way the NFL works.
No, but they are on third down. If he's having a good first and they're in the second half and it's a close game and it's 3rd and 9, Rashaad Penny isn't staying on the field just because
he's not a pass
65
catcher.
yards in the first half.
No, but I'm talking more of that, what you were saying. Well, let's start Rashaad Penny in week 1, but let's not start him in week 2. Well, if he gashes people in week 1, no, he's going to be there in week 2. Yeah, he's not going to be the pass catching back. That's Kenny Gainwell. And maybe Swift can do it as well. So we'll see how Swift factors into that. That to me is an interesting conversation. To me, and again, we get back to the original point with Rashaad Penny and why I think he's an interesting story. He's the guy or he's not. And if he's not the guy, he's probably not going to be on this team.
All right. All I'm saying, John, and maybe this, I would give this a
and by the guy, I mean
10% chance of happening, but maybe, just maybe this year, the Eagles go the load management route. And I'm not talking in game, I'm talking sitting. Yes, that if Rashaad Penny's played 3 games in a row and they dodged a bullet and he's played real well, guess what? Rashaad Penny inactive week 4, even though he's had 3 good games. Why? Load management. If it's leaked into other sports, it can leak into the NFL as well.
Anything can leak in. I'm not saying anything's possible, but that'll be that will be innovative, because if a guy's playing well and he's healthy and you're sitting him for load management, I mean, nobody did it until Greg Popovich did it. Somebody's got to be the first.
Somebody's got to do it first. And
somebody's got to do it first.
Like to be ahead of the curve.
I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it.
Just saying, keep an eye out for it this upcoming year. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That makes us Mac on Birds 365. One Special Ed Cracks is up next here on Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku,